Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Veterans in Politics International, and we want to thank everybody for coming in and listening to our endorsement interview for State Assembly District number 16. Right now we have Joseph Sacco. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Joseph, thank you very much for coming in on this Wednesday morning, especially in these trying times. We want to thank you very much for your attendance. At this time, what I would like you to do is to give a brief background about yourself. Who are you? And then also, can you please tell the viewers and listeners why exactly you're seeking this specific office?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So my name is Joe Sacco. I'm running for Nevada State Assembly here in District 16. I've been a member of this district for 25 years. I am a small business owner. I have a real estate business in the state of Nevada. I have worked as a union stagehand for the past 17 years, setting up shows big and small up and down the Las Vegas Strip, and most prominently have worked in the Las Vegas Convention Center, which is in our district. And I'm also, I consider myself a man of faith. My family raised me very Catholic with morals and ethics. And the reason for my running for office is to carry on the legacy of my late mom, Gail Sacco, who served the homeless and our most vulnerable friends and neighbors in this community for the greater part of the last 20 years of her life. So again, thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and our condolences for the loss of your mother.
Thank you very much. She touched countless lives, and it would be doing a disservice to my mom to not carry the torch and do everything I can to help people. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to start off. My first question has to do specifically with education. As you know, right now, Nevada ranks 49th in the nation as far as education. One of the issues that I see with the public education system here in the state of Nevada is, I'll just give you an example of what I dealt with. So, through my entire 4 years of high school, I got straight A's in English, okay? And once I graduated high school, I decided I wanted to take a break. I didn't want to go straight to a four-year school, but a lot of my colleagues, they said, hey, you know what? You should go to maybe, go to a state community college of some sort and at least start knocking out some of your just general educational requirements. And I said, okay, good. So at that time, I enrolled in into CCSN, which it was called at that time. I found it interesting to get straight A's in high school in English, and then when I took the entrance exam for a community college here in Southern Nevada, I actually was recommended to take English 90, which doesn't even transfer to a four-year school. Now, I wasn't trying to gain access to Harvard or Yale or any prestigious university. So I found that interesting that I couldn't even formulate an actual sentence grammatically. What would you do to improve upon the educational system in the state of Nevada?
Great question. Well, number one, I do think that the state of Nevada puts too much pressure, too much emphasis on testing. And while I do believe that public education should be public, I do also believe that the testing, the requirements are putting a strain on our teachers and their ability to actually teach kids. Now, one part of our platform of our campaign is to put into place a law in Nevada that would set into place public colleges and universities to be tuition free. I feel strongly that what used to be sufficient with a high school diploma is now simply not sufficient in our society. So as you said, you wanted to go to college, you got held back because of bureaucracy, because the testing requirements to start your higher education were just not appropriate, and we're not hitting the mark in our school. We have the 5th largest school district in this country, and we're running out of money. So I believe that a number of things that we can do to improve our education system. First and foremost, I want to increase the revenue that supports our public school education system, and we do that through a tax on the mining industry. Now, I know that might not be popular amongst everyone, but let me just tell you, we have companies like Barrick Gold that take our natural resources and they take all of those profits out of the state. Now, when's the last time you heard a legislator, whether they be a Democrat or a Republican, while they're running or after they're elected, talk about Barrick Gold? You don't hear about it because our politicians on both sides of the aisle take large contributions from these organizations, from these businesses, and the profits that they make do not stay here in the state of Nevada. They go from Nevada to Utah, from Utah to Canada. So, like it or not, my candidacy, our platform, our campaign is all about being authentic, and I'll always be forthright on my positions. I believe that we have a long way to go. A few solutions to education would be, first and foremost, we need to audit our middle and upper management, okay? I completely support teachers being paid better, giving our students a better education. However, if we're one of the largest school districts in the nation, we as public citizens have a right to know how they're spending our tax dollars. So I think that we can, when we work together on both sides of the aisle, I believe that we can have a more efficient school district and create a better education for our high school students, preparing them for college.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, one of the things that you brought up in your question that I found interesting was, so increase taxes on mining, but how about increasing the taxes on the casinos? Because in large part, it's the casino industry is one of the main reasons why, specifically in Southern Nevada, that most students do not try to get a college degree because they can make a lot more money going into the service industry than they can by going to college. However, if you look at the mining industry, most of the mining industry workforce actually needs and requires they actually require you to have college degrees.
Well, let me answer your question with a very simple answer. Yes, our campaign believes that the large corporations, especially the gaming industry, are not paying their fair share. So as your next legislator, I will put pressure on the governor, on other assembly people, and our gaming industry to pay more. If we can afford a large stadium, if we can afford these public-private agreements that put money into the hands of gaming CEOs, then we can afford to give our kids a quality education. And I might add that in this time of the pandemic, with COVID-19 affecting so much of our economy, so many of us, look, as a stagehand, all of the work that myself and thousands of other workers have done, all of that work has stopped, okay? My real estate business has come to a creeping halt. So this economic devastation, not only are we being affected by our health and people are staying home and don't know what to do, but we have a Democratic governor, Steve Sisolak, who has recently appointed Murin from MGM. And look, I personally don't think that CEOs of our gaming companies should be in charge of our task force on this response. We need to be bold. We need to be behind candidates that are people-powered, that listen to the community, and I believe I'm that candidate. I have a long history in the community of speaking truth to power. My mom, Gail Sacco, did it. I continue to do it. And as an assemblyman in the state legislative, I will put pressure on our governor to put people in charge of this task force that are working class people and that have all of our best interest in mind. We can't wait until tomorrow or 2 weeks or 2 months to get our unemployment assistance, to get food benefits. And now it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, we are all feeling the economic hardship of this pandemic, and we need bold action right now.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my colleague here on the left.
Thank you.
2 people to my left.
Good afternoon, Mr. Saco. Did I pronounce it right?
Sacco,
Sacco.
like
Okay.
sack lunch.
Okay,
Yeah,
Sacco.
thank you.
Sorry about that. So you mentioned earlier that the mining industry would pay for the schools, okay, and our education here in Nevada. Now, how much, roughly how much do you think it would cost for all Nevadans to be covered under Medicare? Because I noticed you also said that you would tax, you would put up legislation or support legislation to tax the mining industry.
Great question. Well, first and foremost, we're working with advisors to get that number for you. The cost of Medicare for all, first of all, Medicare is not going to happen overnight. We simply don't have the votes at the legislative level. So first and foremost, we're going to look at a second expansion of Medicaid in the state of Nevada. The ultimate goal is Medicare for all, meaning the plan set forth by Senator Bernie Sanders, which means no co-pays and no deductibles. When you ask the question about how are we going to pay for it, I gave an answer. More revenue from gaming and mining. However, the specifics of how much it's going to cost, that is going to take some time, because when you eliminate the insurance companies, the middlemen, if you will, when we reduce the price of prescription medications and we have an ability to negotiate those prices, a lot of costs that are already being passed to the taxpayers will go down. For example, what do you think a homeless person, whether they're a veteran or not, what do you think poor people do in our poor communities when they get sick? I'll use this pandemic as an example. You get really sick with flu-like symptoms. I was very sick personally in January, 102-degree fever for 5 days. At that time, I was in between insurance coverages. I had no insurance. My 78-year-old father, he got sick. I stayed home. He went to the doctor because he has Medicare and Medicaid. I stayed home and prayed to God that I wasn't going to die. However, what do most people do when they get really sick? Whether they have insurance or not, eventually they go to the hospital. They go to the ER. And because of the way our legal system works, the hospitals can't afford, well, they can afford it, but they don't want to be sued, and they can't refuse a person in an emergency. So what happens is, whether we're talking about COVID-19 or the common cold and flu, when people get so sick they don't know where to turn, they go to UMC, they go to Sunrise Hospital, they go to St. Rose, they take an ambulance, they get a big bill. Many have to file for bankruptcy from medical. All of these costs don't just go up into thin air. They get passed on to the public, to the taxpayers, to all of us working families. So to answer your question, and I wish it was a simple answer, a dollar amount, and we could just put a price tag on it and move forward on funding it. However, it's much more complicated than that, and I'll work with the National Nurses United and other great federal groups, nationwide groups that have crunched the numbers, and we're not going to just create this law out of thin air. We're going to see what other states have done, get the best of all programs, and then collaborate with both sides of the aisle to get it done. And one last thing I want to mention to our more conservative or independent-minded audience, the Koch brothers had a well-funded study of Medicare for all on the national level, and even a very, very Republican think tank funded by the Koch brothers, they agreed that our costs for healthcare in this country are far too high. We're paying double what anyone else is paying. And we're talking about countries like Denmark. We're talking about places in Europe. We're talking about Canada. Places where they can negotiate their drug costs. And people aren't dying because they had the misfortune of being born diabetic. Okay? Look at insulin. And this is, I'll wrap it up because I could speak for 3 hours on this issue. You look at insulin. Let's say you have a son or a daughter that has diabetes and they're not covered because you're laid off. You don't have insurance, they don't have insurance. Maybe they don't qualify for Medicaid because they have a job, part-time or full-time, and they're just above that $17,000 a year qualification mark. We have far too many Nevadans that make too much for benefits but not enough to be covered. And the Affordable Care Act, they didn't go far enough. That bill was corrupted by special interests, by the insurance industry and big pharma. So no child should die because their insulin is unaffordable. And that's why Medicare for All in Nevada is our #1 issue. And I'm the candidate that's bold enough to introduce it.
Joseph, let me ask, I'm going to ask a question along the same lines, only I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. Have you looked at the administrative costs for Medicare for All versus our current system? Because I've heard studies, just first off, full disclosure, like, first time I heard about Medicare for All, I was like, oh, that's crazy. It's going to blow the national deficit through the roof, blah, blah, blah. But then once I started looking more into it, they were talking about how administrative costs would be a lot lower under that plan than they are currently. Have you had an opportunity to look into administrative costs?
Absolutely. Just a few years ago, I started on educating myself around Medicare for All. I went and traveled with Amy Villela, who ran for Congress here in District 4 just a few years ago. Amy lost her daughter unnecessarily because she went to the hospital. She had insurance, although she didn't have her insurance card. She didn't realize she had insurance. She went to Centennial Hills. They told her, this is not a doctor office, you probably should leave. She left. She had a pulmonary embolism that would have easily been found if they had run some diagnostic testing. They didn't, and she lost her life. Now, I bring up Amy and her daughter because I've worked closely with Amy Villela, National Nurses United, and have traveled to Minneapolis for their National Single Payer Conference. And these costs that you're asking about is exactly what these organizations have looked at. Now, when we talk about administrative costs, let's talk about the VA. Let's talk about the Culinary Union right here in our backyard. Any organization, whether it's government-run with a single-payer system that we're advocating for, or the current dysfunctional system where some people are covered and some people are not. I mentioned being sick in January when I was not covered. I've since become eligible with Culinary Union, which is a fantastic insurance program. There's still co-pays and there's still deductibles. However, when I recently wasn't feeling too well, I went and I got my glasses, I got my dental, I saw a regular doctor, got a checkup. And if you look at Culinary's medical center, their health center here, it's fantastic. Everyone treats you with respect and dignity. There's no long lines. However, and I believe this is one reason why the Culinary Union has really pushed back the union bosses, that is, the administrators of that plan, they have pushed back on Medicare for All because when you have a great job and you have a great paycheck, it's in your best interest to keep things the way they are, the status quo. So I may be a union member, and I consider myself union strong with IATSE Local 720 stagehands. I do believe that unions, like any organization, there is some good things and there are some bad things. And when we talk about veterans issues, a lot of veterans say they love their VA benefit. And we've also heard criticisms that the VA has too much bureaucracy, that the wait times are too long. So to answer your question in a nutshell, absolutely. Medicare for all, starting with the state of Nevada, would lower those administrative costs. And
By how much, though?
again, I didn't come prepared today with exact numbers.
Okay, fair
and
enough.
it's the same answer as the first question. It depends, because costs will go down, other costs will go up, and we have to look to the experts. And I'll work with your organization on that in the future.
Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning.
My name is Burke Hall. I have a few questions for you. But before I make my questions, I want to make 3 comments. The first comment I want to make is I really, really, really appreciate your bipartisan view of things. And you obviously don't have a problem with making a comment on someone that's on your team like Sisolak or anybody else. I'm black, I speak Spanish, and I'm a staunch conservative. So you're going to get this from my perspective. I was one of the people that was kind of pissed off when Barack Obama came out here and says, don't come to Vegas and don't spend your money here during one of the worst recessions this town, this city has ever endured. That offended me to no end, and the families of Nevada, because of what they've been through. I recognize and realize and appreciate the fact that you're a business owner, that you have a real estate business, and that you actually work for a living. One of the reasons the Culinary Union has a good medical program is because they have people that are working and paying into it. When we're talking about Medicare for all, someone has to be working and paying into it. So my question for you is, what do you suggest we do to bring business back to Nevada, especially during this time of COVID-19? Because the truth of the matter is that our city basically runs on people's vacation money, the extra money that they have to go on vacation to have a good time. Those things are going to be impacted for a little bit here. What do you suggest we do to bring big business back, and what type of business would you recommend we bring here?
Great question. And for our audience at home, I want to mention that when I got here, just like everyone that's interviewing me, we're all wearing our masks and respecting the 6 feet of separation. I just want our audience at home to know that we have 6 feet now, which is why I'm not wearing the mask. Now, to your question, a number of things need to happen in the state of Nevada, and I would be less than honest and forthright with you to say that we could solve this overnight. First and foremost, our economy runs on gaming. As mentioned before, the mining industry pays little to nothing in taxes. They're like Amazon. They take the money and they run. Now, first of all, we need to expand and diversify on our economy. We cannot solely rely on the casinos to get by. Now, we've seen a miniature version of Silicon Valley in the last 5 to 10 years in our state with groups like Switch, and we're seeing more jobs in technology. However, I think we really need to look at, and I can tell you from my real estate background that I'm not the only one looking at this. We need to find ways to develop our valley that are not only in regards to urban sprawl, where we're cutting into Red Rock, we're cutting into our natural habitats, we're releasing BLM lands. I think we need to think about vertically integrating our housing projects. When we develop mixed use, take downtown Las Vegas, for instance, which is just outside of my district. If we look at all the investment, the 500 million, don't quote me, it was either $1 million or $1 billion. The large amount of money that Tony Hsieh put into downtown. We still don't have a downtown grocery outlet. Imagine if we did. Imagine if we took this opportunity with the pandemic to reevaluate how we live our lives. Many of us, myself included, have realized that now that we're sitting at home more often than not, I've noticed that I'm not driving around running errands that I could do over the phone. You know, we've got things like teleeducation, telehealth. we're going to see a massive shift in our economy, a massive shift in our society. Like it or not, we're not going to all go back to work and have the status quo the way we were accustomed to for the greater half of the last century. Okay? So first and foremost, we need to make sure that when our workers do go back to the workforce, that they're happy and healthy. This is an issue that affects our poor communities, our underserved communities, our veterans, our Black community, our LGBT community, any community that is disproportionately affected by not having the same educational opportunities, anyone that has been affected mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically by this lockdown, by the stay-at-home order. We need to really put people first, and then we need to roll up our sleeves and get back to work. And I think that you're absolutely correct when you have expressed your criticisms of our former Democratic president in some of the comments that were made. And I'm here to tell you that the time of blue versus red, black versus white, up and down, left and right, these concepts are going out the window. Working families, working class people, and especially the youth, and I'm not talking about high schoolers, I'm talking about college-aged kids and people that have graduated in the last 10 years. This new class of people is going to change the political landscape of our country and our state and our local communities. And we need to start working across the aisle and being straight with the voters. And that's what our campaign is all about.
Thank you very much. Excellent answer. I would vote for you.
I appreciate that. And you can volunteer and contribute at votejosacco.com. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
My next question is, I've been thinking Southern Nevada in particular needs other types of businesses to come in. We manufacture, a lot of our stuff is manufactured in China. Speaking of, you were talking about this diabetic young lady, which I am diabetic, by the way. Our insulin, almost all of our insulin that we get at the VA and stuff is made in China. Mm-hmm. Would you be opposed to working with someone like President Trump in bringing a facility that could do those things here?
In a nutshell, yes. I think that when we have conversations, civil discourse, I was watching the news the other day, quick story. I was watching the news and I was disappointed to hear that our speaker, Nancy Pelosi, on the Democrat side, if you will, refuses to speak with our president. Like him or not, hate him or love him, he is our president. He holds the highest office in this nation. And unless and until we have candidates and elected officials that are willing to sit down face to face and have these tough conversations, we're going to see the grind and circulation of money in politics from DC all the way to Clark County. And I, for one, I've had enough of that, and I'm not afraid to sit down with Donald Trump, with Fox News, with Veterans in Politics, with any organization that wants to work on our common goals, build bridges, and build coalitions that help all of our people. It's not going to be easy, and I know you've probably heard this before from politicians, but my record in the community of speaking truth to power, regardless of the letter next to their name, shows you what kind of character I have. And I think in 2020, it's important that we elect people with a bold character and are authentic and transparent on where they stand.
Okay, so my next question is, as of January 2019, Nevada had an estimated 7,169 homeless, but I'm sure it's much higher. You talk about housing for all Nevadans, and you mentioned a tiny home village. Where would this village be located, and how do you also plan on funding this?
Good question. Number one, where would it be located? I think that in District 16, we have a lot of undeveloped land that is very expensive. One of the challenges, and I know this from personal experience being in real estate, developers want the highest and best use. Translation to the everyday person, they want to make as much money as they can per square foot, per acre, and that's something that we have to work on in a bipartisan manner. So I think what we do is we find an area that's centrally located, because poor people, nobody wants poor people projects in their backyard. We call it NIMBY, not in my backyard. This was an issue when my mom and my dad, myself and others were helping the homeless. They said, you can't do it here, but we love what you're doing, do it somewhere else. And then we would do it somewhere else, and people would say, that's a great idea, I'm glad someone cares about the poor, but don't do it here, do it somewhere else. So this is going to be a community-oriented, community-led decision on exactly where we develop something like this. And to your second question, how we pay for it, again, just like our other initiatives with Medicare and for expanding higher education, opening it up to all of our people, what we do is we lessen the cost, the burden, the tax dollar burden on our public, because right now, what happens is our homeless and our poor are arrested for nonviolent, petty crimes, such as sleeping on the sidewalk, sleeping in a public park, going to the bathroom in an alleyway because nobody wants to let them use the bathroom in their businesses. And we don't have public restrooms in every part of town. Some of them have even been closed in our parks in an attempt to cut down on crime. We have city council people, our mayor in particular, that thinks that all homeless people, which I might add 1/3 of the homeless are our veterans, which we supported when they signed up, when we supported them when they went to war, when they did their service, and then most people forget about the veterans when they come home. So what we need to do is we need to emulate what other states have done. And I've studied Utah, for example. The state of Utah created a tiny home village. These are not mansions. They're not luxurious suites. This doesn't cut into decentivizing people from getting a job, from being what we call productive members of society. There are homeless and poor and vulnerable people that have mental diversity, that suffer from PTSD and other chronic issues, whether they be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, that prohibit them from working right here, right now. So what the state of Utah did was they created this tiny home efficiency project, which it wasn't just free. People had to work for it. They had to apply for it. They had to meet in the middle and do certain things. They had to sign up for other services and get the help they need to be rehabilitated. And the state of Utah did this at a cost to the taxpayers of only $17,000 per year. Now you might say, well, that's a lot of money, and where's that going to come from? Again, mining, gaming, and also keep in mind that I've interviewed homeless folks right here in Clark County, right here in District 16. I've interviewed homeless folks that have been arrested and gone to jail 100 times in a year. They get arrested for sleeping on a park bench because they have nowhere to turn. They don't want to go to the 3 private shelters because either they can't put the bottle down, or they smoke marijuana, or they have other issues where they don't want to hear a prayer, or maybe they don't get in line in time to get a bed. So they take a nap on a park bench, or they fall asleep under a tree. They get arrested. They go to jail. 3 days later, 72 hours later, they get released. The same thing with mental health. Our mental health system is broken. When people are walking through traffic and it looks like they're trying to commit suicide, maybe they're panhandling, maybe they just have given up, they're ready to throw in the towel. Same thing, they get a legal 2,000. They go to our hospitals. That cost just doesn't go into thin air, it comes out of the public funds. So when we put homeless people, when we put poor people into the spotlight, and our campaign is willing to do that, to speak for the most vulnerable, those that don't have a voice, we can house everyone in the state of Nevada and have zero homelessness and do it at a cost far less. Because when people get locked up 100 times in a year, the federal and state subsidies, the jails, they get paid roughly $1,000 a night to house these people. And our jails and prisons should not be used as healthcare facilities. They should be not used as temporary housing solutions. And that's how we get it done.
Mr. Sacco, first thing I want to just compliment you on is out of all the people that I've either interviewed on the show, talked to in person, or on all these panels, you're the first one that has actually, you're the first one that has actually called yourself a politician. And I mean this sincerely. I really want to compliment you on that, because I am so tired of the platitude that I'm not the typical politician. I never signed up to be a politician. Well, guess what? If you're running for a political office, you're now a politician, right? So that speaks largely to your character, in my opinion. So now to lead into my question. Because of the schools being shut down right now, I know the governor and Java were going back and forth quite a bit about whether they should close the Clark County School District. And one of the things that Java was concerned about was testing scores. Well, Sisolak finally just said, okay, enough is enough. And, well, now they've decided that they're not going to do any testing this year because it wouldn't be fair because the kids aren't in the classroom. For me personally, I think that testing should still go ahead, because one of the reasons why I say that is because for years I've heard teachers that are friends of mine and people in teachers' unions state that the standardized testing is not fair because kids learn in a multitude of different fashions. So why not let the testing go forward? And then that would give us kind of a basis point to see how much these kids actually learn on their own. Would you be in favor of go ahead and let's do the testing this year? Or at the beginning of next year, because obviously we understand what's going on right now.
So to answer your question, earlier we talked about testing, and I mentioned that we're doing too much testing, and frankly, we're doing the wrong kind of testing. Now, to speak to your question regarding how students learn differently, this was brought up by our school board trustee, Danielle Ford, and she got a lot of flack from both the left and the right from the establishment wing of our education system. The bottom line is, when kids get a diagnosis, let's say ADHD, they get put on what we call an IEP. And for the audience that maybe not everyone knows, what that represents, what that means is individualized education plan. You mentioned that when you were going from high school to college, that in the area of math, you weren't up to speed. Maybe the school system failed you. Maybe math is just not your forte.
Actually, it was English, but yeah.
Oh, excuse me, English. So maybe that was not your forte, right? Every student learns differently. I do believe that testing, we need to have standards, we need to have metrics. We live in a world, in a system of meritocracy, okay? Sometimes people cheat their way to the top. That is just what goes with the flow of living in a free market system, living in a free society. Not everyone can be the king, you know? Now that being said, I think we need to reevaluate our testing system. Who's creating these tests? Which private companies are selling these tests to our school district? And at what cost to the taxpayers?
Any suggestion on who that should be?
Again, this is where I would lean on advisors, my education team, getting into the nitty-gritty. Like I said, look, I am a politician. I ran for city council when I was 27. You know, we were not successful in that run. Like you say, you know, if you put your neck on the line, if you're running for office, you're a politician. Again, though, I'm very authentic, and if I don't have a specific answer, I'm not going to, as an old school phrase saying goes, I'm not going to blow smoke. Okay, so do we need testing? Do we need to know where our teachers are, where our students are, where we're succeeding, and where we need more help? Absolutely. I do think that we can do it at a less costly price tag to the public, and I think that teleeducation, using technology, can be a big help in that area. You know, buying books, printing up paper, it's not environmental. And every time there's an update, that cost is passed on to our parents, our students, our teachers, and we could do a whole lot more with a lot less, is what I'm saying.
Okay, you talked about criminal justice system reform. What bill would you introduce if elected, and how would it be structured?
Excellent, great question. Well, as you may know, every legislator in the state of Nevada gets to introduce 5 bills. One of our bills is going to be related to criminal justice reform, and specifically what we want to look at, what we want to accomplish is releasing all nonviolent criminal offenders in relation to crimes regarding cannabis. We've since made marijuana not only recreationally legal, but also medicinally legal. And although at the federal level, it is still akin to heroin as a Schedule I drug, I think anybody who's ever partaked or been around anyone who has used marijuana or cannabis recreationally or medicinally, the public knows now that this is a very low-risk substance. Alcohol causes more car accidents, more crimes, more violence, more issues. And I want to mention that specifically our communities of color, our black and brown friends and neighbors in our communities, we all know, this is no secret, they've been at the forefront of the DEA, FBI, and the national attack on the war on drugs, okay? And I think that it's important, if we had a full-time legislature, when the city council, when our city government didn't have the guts to do what they're supposed to do and release these people from the jails, the Nevada state legislators could make it happen. When the city makes unconstitutional laws against sleeping on a sidewalk, attacking our homeless and most vulnerable, the state legislature could take action and make it happen. Now, I know that's a whole nother subject to get into, and it's not a very popular one. Here I am, I'm running for office, and I'm already saying it should be full-time, not part-time. I do think that there's a lot more that we need to look at. And as far as our bill goes, I would make it crystal clear that we should release and also have a plan to rehabilitate anybody, black, white, brown, yellow, red, it doesn't matter who, but we know that these communities, the black and brown communities, have suffered the most. And that's the kind of criminal justice reform I'm talking about. Also, I want to mention that I want to advocate for our police department to get better training and have more resources to train our officers around the mental health, the diversity that we have in our community. We saw not that many years ago a mentally unwell person in the middle of the desert throwing rocks. I don't know how big these rocks were. Maybe they were pebbles, maybe they were boulders, I don't know. But they were throwing rocks at a state trooper. They were shot and killed. We don't have the kind of training that is necessary for our police force, and that's something that I want to work closely with Metro Police Department. And this isn't a left or right issue. When our police departments are focused on being community-oriented, and I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I've studied a little bit about this. You look at other countries like Japan versus the United States, they do things differently, okay? And the people in other countries are not afraid of our police departments like they are in our backyard. So I think that we should be fighting for and working with our police unions, with our police organization, to give them the training so that we can lessen the use of deadly force, that we can lessen the overwhelming number of lawsuits over deaths related to our arrests. Now, people need to follow the law, and people aren't off the hook when they do something to put the public or our officers at risk. But I think that we need a level-headed candidate that we put in the state legislative that's going to work with all sides and come to an agreement that makes sense.
Great answer. Best answer I heard yet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sacco. Just to let my panel members and so we got about 7 more minutes for questions and answers, and then that way that'll give the candidate 5 minutes to wrap up, if that's okay with you two.
Fantastic. Mr. Sacco, as a business owner myself, veteran, black, speak Spanish, how do I say this? I'm a huge proponent of people working. I believe that small business runs our country. Not big business, it's small business. The mom and pops guy that's sacrificing for his family, that's up late, that starts before the sun gets up, goes to bed long after the sun goes down. These are the people, this is the engine of America. All of our resources and funding to fund grand programs like Medicare for All and Medicaid for All, whatever, it comes from the small business guy. There's some principles in small business, like the book of the Little Red Hen, that seems to come to mind in this situation. Can you explain to me why we should give more money to the school district for bad behavior? Why we should reward bad behavior from the school district? And when I say this, year before last we were 49th. Last year we were 50th. We were the champions of stupidity here. UNLV is now referred to as University of Never Leaving Vegas. I have a son that's on the honor roll, and he can't read, and he's 9. And this comes from public schools, Katz Elementary. Can you explain to me why we should reward bad behavior by giving these clowns more money? I can go to Vietnam right now, and there's a lady with a chalkboard that can do long division with their kids, and they don't have any money. We spend more money per student than any other place on planet Earth this country does. I do not see why in the hell we should spend more money with these people. And I want you to explain to me why we should do this.
Great question. First of all, I'm not familiar with the story of the red hen, so forgive me.
Let me help you.
Okay.
Many years ago, there's a book called The Little Red Hen. And Little Red Hen kind of goes like, the red hen turned around and wanted to bake some bread. So he said, who's going to help me gather the wheat? And not I, said the fox. Not I, said the chicken. Not I, said the... and it goes on. And then who's going to help me knead the dough? Not I, said the... Not I. Who's going to help me eat the bread? I will, said everybody at the end, after going through this long, drawn-out thing. Basically... It's basically saying, and Little Red Hen said, no, I'm going to eat my own bread, and my little chickens are going to eat my own bread because you guys didn't help me make it. And there's a book called Little Red Hen. I'm old. All right.
Got it. Yeah.
So I have a tendency to look at things through older perspectives, and I remember when this country was great, infinitely better. We didn't have kids killing each other at schools. We didn't have gun shootings. Like I said yesterday, the biggest 3 things that get you sent to the principal's office was chewing gum, talking in class, and running in the damn hallway. So I care about the lives of our children, as I am a father myself, and I look at our deplorable, just unbelievable failure of a school system when we spend this much money, and I don't understand why we should throw more money at it.
Great question. I really appreciate that. To your question, first and foremost, I think it's a false choice to decide to put education versus small business. And let me explain. We need resources to improve certain institutions, education being one of them. How we do that is with efficient and very analytical thinking. We do that together through organizations like Veterans in Politics, with candidates, with leaders like myself that are not afraid to have these conversations with the independent and more conservative voters, okay? So first and foremost, I do believe we've got a long way to go. You mentioned other countries versus the US. Our education system is absolutely missing the mark, and we have a long way to go. I talked earlier about how we do that funding through taxing, through finding new revenue sources, through our largest corporations, and through gaming and oil. Now, for one, let me just explain my steadfast, my lifelong commitment to small businesses. I grew up in a family that owned small restaurant businesses. My family, Gail and Joe Sacco Sr., they had a small business downtown called the Onion Bun Cafe. And when the economy hit rough patches, we only stayed open because customers continued to give us their loyalty. You don't find that too often in the city of Las Vegas. We're a transient state, people come and go. We're a transient city. Even our district here in 16, people move around a lot. They go from apartment to condo to house and vice versa, okay? Which is why our campaign has been encouraging people to continue to support the small restaurants, the small businesses that are open. Personally, I always look to a small family-owned business in our community before spending our dollars at a national chain, for example. So to say why fund education and not small business, I think that's a false choice. And furthermore, I 110% support not only the federal government, but the state government in funding and prioritizing all COVID-19 task force relief monies to not only help our unemployment division, to fund people, to keep people in their homes, to keep people well fed while we get through this rough patch. But I think also that through the CARE Act, which is a start, that we should be putting money into the hands of small business owners that have risked everything to leave their 9 to 5, to leave their hourly wage, to leave their previous positions in society, to take chances and to open these businesses. I don't believe that we should be taxing small businesses anymore. I do believe that we can fund our ambitious platform by increasing these new sources of revenue. And again, I'm all about efficiency and holding people's feet to the fire. And that doesn't matter if they're a Democratic governor or a Democratic Assembly caucus.
I understand what you're saying, but my point is, I'm not saying to defund education. I'm saying we already pay them infinitely more than enough to do the job that they're supposed to do. And they have not done it. In fact, not only have they not done it, they are failing our children. It used to be they just failed black children. It used to be they just failed minority children. They're failing white children too now. I do not see why in the world we should be paying them even more money. I'm not saying even defund them. I'm saying, why in the world should I go to a business that's a successful mining business, tax the living hell out of them for this? For infinitely poor choices that they have made. And it'd be different if we were middle of the road. We are not middle of the road. We are last in education. The Appalachian Mountains are doing better than us. Folks have been married 3 times, still got the same in-laws. Theme song Deliverance is playing in the fillings in their teeth, and they are doing better than Las Vegas, Nevada. That is shameful, and something needs to be done about it. And I do not in any way endorse supporting or increasing the funding to these clowns. There needs to be some serious disciplinary action. The entire school board needs to be beyond fired. They need to be criminally charged.
Mr. Sacco, do you want to go ahead and respond to that real quick? We got like 2 minutes left. If you'd like to respond to that last question, please, and then look into the camera and give for about 2 minutes, tell the voters exactly who you are, how they can get involved in your campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, Burke, to answer your question, it's not easy, okay? I hear you. I hear the frustration in your voice. I know that this frustration is shared across our community. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue, okay? I'm a registered Democrat. I'm running for a seat that is open, that's been held by a Democrat for the past many, many years since Heidi Swank was appointed to the position. I would be naive or being less than forthright if I told you that I had all the answers right here, right now, today, to solve our educational dilemma. I do support the public school system. I do think that public dollars should stay in public education. To answer your questions about the specifics, the details, and the fabric of how we pay for it, where that money comes from, again, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, I think that there's a lot of areas where money's flying out the window. We need to have a task force to audit the entire system. There's no reason why it should cost $5 million to build a new school. There's no reason why our kids, why your child doesn't know how to read. There's no reason why high school graduates in the state of Nevada should be having a hard time starting their college education. We have a long way to go, and if there's one thing that I can guarantee you, and I'm not going to say promise because that's political lingo for, yes now and we'll talk later, but I guarantee you that veterans will always have a seat at the table, and they will have an equal voice at the state legislature when my campaign is successful and when our people-powered campaign and our ideas are brought to the floor. We've got a lot of corrupt politicians on both sides of the aisle. The changes that we need are not going to happen overnight, but I guarantee that I will be a voice of bold change in regards to education, housing, healthcare, veterans issues, and criminal justice reform. And on that note, you want me to look at your camera or mine?
Either one is fine, just as long as you let people know your name, what
Sure.
you're running for, and then most importantly, as running for office, just make sure you give the viewers and listeners like how they can get involved in your campaign, contact information as well, please.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Big thanks to Steve Sanson and his organization, Veterans in Politics. Again, my name is Joe Sacco. I'm running for Nevada State Assembly here in District 16. I'm your Democratic candidate. If you are an independent or a Republican and would like to support our campaign with your vote, please go to the Secretary of State website and register as a Democrat. The entire state is going to be on mail-in ballot. I hope that creates a larger turnout because all of our community should have their voices heard. Our campaign is all about creating an education system, a housing system, a healthcare system, a criminal justice system, and an entire state that serves all of our people, not just the wealthy and not just the corporations. So to find out more, go to votejoesacco.com, or you can call me direct on my cell phone, which is 702-275-0714. And again, we're looking for volunteers, phone canvassers, and people that want to contribute. Every dollar counts. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sacco. And that now concludes our endorsement panel interview for State Assembly District number 16.
Thank you.